The meeting is being broadcast live, and a recording of this meeting will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting has concluded. We welcome the use of the Welsh language in meetings, but I've had no requests for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can members refrain from using the chat function, instead use the raise hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. May also remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending a meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask that you all please use your cameras for the duration of the meeting. And please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking, and do not interrupt discussions until you have notified of your intention to speak and you have been invited to do so. Okay, thanks. So, moving on to the agenda. Agenda item 1. Welcome and apologies. Niall, do we have any apologies, please?
Yeah, afternoon, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Carl Gordon and Caroline Price. Okay,
agenda item 2. Declarations of interest. Members, do you have any interest to declare, please?
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, I can. Thank you, Councillor Hall.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Police and Crime Command panel, and I've been advised to not attend this meeting. So this is where I exit, and I wish you a good afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hall. And you may now leave the meeting, please.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, agenda item 3 are the minutes of the 1st of March 2024. Members, to remind you, these are the minutes of the meeting scrutinising the first year's performance of the Adult Community Learning Commercial Offer. Members, do you approve of these minutes, please? Okay, thank you very much. Move on to agenda item 4, which is the action sheet. And Rebecca, could you please run through the action sheet?
Thank you, Chair. So there are 2 actions on the action sheet there that are still outstanding with some information from the last meeting, so I will get that sent out to members as soon as I have it available. Apologies you haven't had it as yet. And then the final action on the action sheet is the responses to the recommendations from the last meeting, which you have all received. So unless members have any feedback on those, Chair, I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rebecca. Agenda item 5. Preparing the Council to comply with the serious violence duty. This afternoon I would like to welcome Councillor Peter Jones, who is the Executive Member of Corporate Governance and Performance, Lyndon Puddy, Head of PSSU, Kate Williams, who is the Group Manager of Public Services Support Unit, Catherine Jones, Community Safety Lead and Public Services Support Unit, Martin Smith from the OPCC, which is the Serious Violence Partnership Coordinator. Would the Executive Member or officers like to make any comments before members commence questioning, please?
Can I start, Chair? Very briefly.
Yes, Peter, no problem. Yes, Councillor Peter Jones.
Sorry, I said we've got some very capable officers present today, so they'll be taking us through the detail of the report. So I'm going to be brief, Chair. The report sets out the requirements of the serious violence duty, and it's really important in the context of making Torfaen a safer place to live and visit. I'm not going to say any more because I know Lyndon, Catherine, Kate and Martin have got a lot of expertise in this area. And I think it's Catherine, are you going to take us through the report in detail? I'll hand back to you, Chair, and we'll see which officer is going to take the lead.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for your time this afternoon. I'm here with my colleagues that have just been introduced, and we're here to discuss the Council's compliance with the serious violence duty. As you'll see, the report sets out the requirements of the duty, what the Council needs to do to comply with the duty, and the potential implications the Council could face if we don't meet the requirements. Data has been provided on serious violence in Torfaen throughout the report, and we look forward to discussing areas of future development with you. I'd like to thank Catherine and the community safety team and our community safety partners for all their hard work and commitment in not only developing a serious violence needs assessment, but for all their dedication and hard work in supporting the community, victims and perpetrators from the effects of serious violence and making Torfaen a safer place to live and work. So I know that you've had the report and gone through that, so I'm not going to go through any further details on that, but we'll just welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Many thanks. Yeah. So, right, question 1 then, which is relevant to paragraph 3.2. The serious violence duty went live across England and Wales on the 31st of Jan 2023. Before that, what preparation took place before the duty went live, please?
Thank you, Councillor. So preparation for the duty went live was to get the statutory organisations together in compliance with the Sentencing Courts Act of 2023. And obviously those that are listed are the local authorities, the police, in this instance Gwent Police, the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, who are the lead conveners, health boards and youth offending teams and probation services. And they were tasked, therefore, to come together to put a strategic needs assessment in place. And what is that? Well, that is examining all the issues which affect Gwent on a pan-Gwent basis in terms of serious violence, in line with the rest of the United Kingdom as well, but looking at local issues which are specific to Torfaen, for example, or down to ward-based, and trying to ascertain which areas are in most need of some intervention work or prevention work to tackle serious violence. Now, the Home Office were quite relaxed in how they wanted areas to define what their term for violence was, but we collectively took a World Health Organization view on that, looking at a more holistic example, which an awful lot of other areas in the United Kingdom did as well. But the Home Office were very keen, in fact insisted that we look at homicides and also knife crime, because those are the crimes which most cause fear in communities. And obviously homicide goes without saying, but the fear of knife crime. That's not to say everywhere is London or Nottingham, Leeds, Manchester, wherever, but it's that fear, that climate of fear that needs to be addressed. So really looking down into the details of those particular types of crimes. Now Kate's with us today, who sits on the homicide reviews, domestic homicide reviews. So again, and I know there might be questions about that afterwards, but it's those statutory bodies are already in existence before the duty was put together to examine what were the causes of some of those domestic related homicides. Were they foreseeable? What interventions were put in place? What local authorities or any public bodies are involved with either the perpetrators or the victims? And essentially, could we have seen that coming, and what could we have done to prevent it? So really that is what was tasked from the serious violence duty, and what was in place before was, which is still in place and will work in tandem and will be the delivery arm of the serious violence duty, is your community safety partnerships, because previously they had this kind of sole grip on types of violence. Now within Gwent Police they also have serious and organised crime groups, which has been set up, and they also have a homicide and serious violence group. So the police itself will provide some of that data, and whilst we're now in this group, we can tap into some of that data and have a better picture and understanding of the issues which affect us here in Torfaen, but also across the whole of Gwent.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on to question 2, which is a question from Councillor Liam Coles, please.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 3.3 of the report states that the duty also requires specified authorities to consult other relevant authorities. In relation to education authorities, would this include school and/or college representatives? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, it does, and for good reason. If you look through the report, it talks about youth violence, Councillor, and I think it's fair to say there's concern in schools about what is the level of violence in schools, peer on peer, but also pupil on staff member. How is that being collated? I suggest it probably it varies across the whole of the county. So we need to work with education to understand what the true level of violence is within our schooling environments, because we're committed to make them safe and prosperous locations for our young people to develop, nurture and receive top-class education. So already through your CSP, and I'm sure Kath can talk about this as well, there's been some really good work already within schools. They're fundamental part of the serious violence duty. While they're not a statutory body specifically within the core of it, they are very much allied to it, and we listen to them. And we're actually trying to get more information and data, so we have a richer picture of what the environment is in schools in terms of violence, and how can we address that through intervention and prevention. And just before I hand over to Kath, I mean, she can tell you in detail about what YOS is doing to support that, to deal with perpetrators and to try and turn them around before they're excluded from schools, etc.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Just to add, I'm not sure if a question will come up on the interventions linked to school, so I can go into more detail in a second on that. But in terms of the educational authorities being linked in as the relevant authorities, specifically for Torfaen, we work so closely with our schools and our colleges and our sixth forms in all aspects of our duties under Crime and Disorder Act, the Counter-Terrorism Act, as well as the Serious Violence Duty. So we are linked in really well with them.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for the answers. Question 3 is a question for Councillor Nathan Yole, please.
Thank you, Chair, and hello everyone. Nice to see you this afternoon. So this is in relation to paragraph 4.1.3. So specified authority partners in Gwent have agreed to adopt a broad definition of violence, or areas of focus. So just really, are we confident that this definition is comprehensive enough to actually, for whatever eventualities might come? Are there any gaps that we are aware of within this definition? And I guess what I'm quite keen to understand is actually what mechanisms are there in place to start prioritising underneath that? Because I know I'm asking if you missed anything out, but it's quite broad to begin with, and it's actually how do we drill down and actually how do we ensure that resources are allocated where they need to be, when they need to be?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good question, Councillor. And for the reason it is broad initially, we've got to remember this is embryonic, so it's the starting point. We obviously were under a tight time scale to get a strategy and a strategic needs assessment published in line with the legislation. But it's our document, it's your document, and it should reflect that. It should reflect what the needs of our local authority members are telling us from the community they represent. Is it therefore capturing what the real issues are in terms of violence within the community? As I said earlier, we're different from other areas, although we have similarities in some of the crime types around serious violence. It's a given that it will be homicide and knife crime from the Home Office, but already we're looking, and that's what the working group is working on now, in terms of getting that data around what's our public space violence. And you may have heard already that there's a Home Office funded project which Gwent Police are heavily involved in now, which is to do with hotspot patrolling. So, for example, I know Blaenavon receives a hotspot patrol priority, which is funded from central government funding. And the premise of that is to be there in the right place to deter those incidents of antisocial behaviour linked to violence. So that's in place already. But as I said, we don't have all the data. We don't have all the data in schools. Yeah. We kind of think there's issues there, but if you ask me to tell you what the figures are, I haven't got them. So I think that's where we need to get to. So that's the whole premise of the duty, is to have those discussions, to join up the dots. So what do YOS know? What do services that are commissioned know in terms of St Giles, that we obviously commission through the PCC's office and support YOS? What does the Education Authority know? What do the unions in school teaching know about it? So it's getting all that information, so we've got a really rich picture of some of the issues which we think we might be facing. We already know from schools that vaping is an issue. Why is vaping linked to violence? Well, because there's a suggestion that some individuals are coerced by adults to sell vapes into school. And we know that some vapes may be loaded with THC or spice, which then, you're into that spiky environment, and then you could be into that violence against girls and women environment where you've got sexual exploitation. So it's really drilling down into all of that, but understanding, is that what we're facing here? Is that something which is specific to Torvine, or is it the whole of Gwent, or is it Newport, or is it something which we think we see in the papers and we don't fully understand it because we don't recognise it? So it is very briefly working from the definition we've got now, may then be different from where we are in 12 months, 18 months' time.
If I can, that was the supplementary, actually. As we're almost at the 18-month point from this being sort of put into practice last January, are you seeing that as trends are emerging that some of our starting positions have changed, or that some of the hotspots or the pressure points are evolving differently than we would have anticipated?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So what we are seeing is we've got the general definition, but for us in Torvine, we seem to be heading towards tackling youth violence and the risk factors that lead to a young person engaging in violence. So whilst our overall aim is to reduce violence, we're actually finding that by tackling antisocial behaviour much earlier, and in comes down with the vaping, the underage drinking and our associated behaviour, we're hoping that that's going to have the effect on the reduction in the serious violence. But because you can't evidence that until the young person is older, you can't see the long-term projection of it just yet. But short-term, we are focusing our work on the youth violence in schools.
And just another question, final question on this point then. Are we an outlier in Torvine then, or are similar trends actually emerging across the footprint of the Gwent PCC?
Yeah, it's a similar trend, and probably UK as well, if I'm honest. It is, as I said, getting that consistency within the education authorities. Are they linked up? Are they recording incidents of violence in the same way? That's where we need to get to, so we can understand exactly what the picture is.
Thank you, Councillor Yowell. Good questions. Question 4 is one by myself. In the report it mentions arson with threat to life. Well, does arson without threat to life come under the serious violence duty? Also, in the report, there was no mention of any sort of gang-related crimes or any county line-related crimes. Would these fall under other determinations of criminal activity, please?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I'll take the first question is around, so the fire service are embedded into the duty, and so we have a representative from South Wales Fire and Rescue. At the high end, arson with intent to endanger life, yes, absolutely, that's in there. But they also deal with, and they report on, general arson as well, and they've made tremendous strides with their prevention intervention work. The unfortunate position we're in at the moment is they've just changed a member of staff, so we haven't had that information, but that's the type of information we'll be collating. And it's allied to what Kath said, really. It's almost like setting fires is antisocial behaviour, but with some dangers associated as well. But if you tackle that earlier, you should make sure that you don't then have arson with intent to endanger life. You try and deal with it at source when you first, like grass fires, etc. So if you're dealing with those lower-end types of offences with arson, shall we say, for better want of description, you should prevent it escalating. That's the whole idea. Serious organised crime and county lines, yes, that would fit into here. So through our governance structure, and I know that there's a public service board restructuring going on with, obviously then for Pangwent and then your community safety partnerships. But linking into those are serious organised crime meetings, and that's dealt with by, it comes into CSP as well, doesn't it, I think Kath. And again, it's picking up trends. So what are the issues of exploitation? So we do get some data from that. We've got to be careful how that is shared, how the police would share that with us, because there's obviously the sensitivity around, quite rightly, some of the information. But we know that it's here, and it does form some of the work that we will do in the future around serious violence.
Just to add to that, Chair, lots of the work that the community safety team and our Safer Torvine, which is our community safety partnership, do, look at those monthly stats around arson, serious organised crime, all of those kind of things. We have that kind of information. So as part of the Safer Torvine group, that cohort of work and that is being done and looked at within that, looking at the priorities, looking at what we need to do for that group. But I think as part of the serious violence, we're taking this in its own entity then, but all the other community safety issues then are being picked up through our Safer Torvine partnership.
Thank you very much. Question 5 is another question by Councillor Nathan Yall, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is in regards to paragraph, I can't say it, this is in regards to paragraph 4.2.2, yeah, that's the right one. And it's about collaborating with relevant partners by attending meetings and sharing relevant data. I guess it's just a question, like I said, go back to what I said earlier on about this being an emerging process and emerging functions at least, because I think the encouraging thing is actually from what you said, we're using the existing partnerships that are in place. We haven't started from scratch. So I guess our question was, is this collaborate, how have we formalised the collaboration? And if we have done, how so? I guess I've already answered the question if you're utilising the Safer Communities frameworks, but can you just potentially talk us through then how you've had to retrofit what we were already doing to ensure that we were taking the new duty seriously?
So, with my appointment, I work within the PCC, specifically for serious violence duty. And you're quite right, what government said is don't duplicate effort and don't try to replace existing frameworks which are already proven and have positive outcomes. So I sit on all the CSPs as well, and I network very closely with Kath and with Kate, and that's replicated across all the CSPs in Gwent. Yeah. So there's some form of harmonisation there in terms of understanding what each area is dealing with. And from that, we try and learn best practice, what works, what are our outputs and our outcomes, and can we share resourcing? Can we do things together, which is better in terms of being efficient and effective? And it's also maintaining that contact with police as well, because we understand, you'll have local policing representation on those panels. So the Crime Commission raising debt really is to hold the police to account and apply scrutiny to ensure that they're complying with their obligations within the CSP, are available there to provide data and updates. If they're not, then I'm in a position to try and get that and ask those questions and just remind them of their duty.
Yeah, just to add to that, when we were looking at enacting this, there was lots of meetings to start with, and it was, do we go and do Torvine do this, the Blind of Gwent do this? Well, actually, as Gwent, we've worked really well together across community safety issues. We formerly had the Safer Gwent Community Safety Partnership, and actually of getting the needs assessment together, it made more sense to do that in collaboration, for there to be one needs assessment initially, that we could all draw on our own different parts of that and then take back to our relevant community safety partnerships of what we need to prioritise for our area. But I think that collaboration of partners, of that whole document, of getting all of that information together, really kind of showed that sort of partnership working, and the input that we had from our health colleagues in implementing that, rather than just sort of the usual community safety colleagues, health, like say fire, and that collaboration then of bringing that document together was key.
If I can, Chair, in that case then, what conversations have there been, because presumably the government set out that this was a duty that the principal authorities had to, or resided with principal authorities, but, I mean, has any conversation taken place about whether actually this would make sense if the principal authorities within the Greater Gwent footprint actually collectivised their approach and had a Gwent approach to this?
I think it's down, the duty sits on it within the council then. The individual councils need to adhere to show their compliance with the duty. So we would have to ensure that we were doing what we needed to do for Torvine, yeah. But I think it's having that kind of approach. We've recently reenacted the Safer Torvine, which we didn't have before because we had our local service board, then we had a public service board when that went to Gwent, so we've reinstated that. So I think it's making sure that even though there are overarching Gwent principles that aren't too dissimilar in all areas. We need to make sure this is as local as possible, that we are doing what we need to do for the issues and the priorities for Torfaen, not just Gwent. We're very different to Newport. We're not the same as all the other local authorities. So I think we need to have an overarching understanding of the terminology and process, but I think the localism then comes back to our Safer Torfaen and what we need to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Question 6, invite Councillor Nick Byrne, please.
Thank you, Chair. This question is regards to 4.2.2 of the report, the contribution to the development of the needs assessment and strategy. Where are we in terms of development of the needs assessment and strategy?
Thanks, Councillor. So we were part of the Serious Violence Working Group that sat regionally, and part of our role as Torfaen was to provide data from our wellbeing assessments, from the census, education that we had to inform the Torfaen chapter. As Kate just said, we've got our Gwent needs assessment and strategy, and what I'd like to do going forward now is pick out what's important for Torfaen, what's the data showing us for Torfaen, and then develop our own strategy with our CSP under Safer Torfaen to make sure that whilst we've got the overarching Gwent data, we have enough specific data for us to be able to inform where our resources are going to go in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Byrne. Question 7 is another question by Councillor Nathan Yall, please.
Recurring theme. Right, so this one is about paragraph 4. This is 4.2.2 again, and it relates to the sentence in the paper committing to implement the results of the strategy, e.g. commissioning services, delivering prevention and early intervention activities. So who will give final approval of the assessment and strategy, and who will be responsible for monitoring its delivery and performance?
So the Torfaen strategy will come under Safer Torfaen, so we'll monitor that. There's subgroups in place to look at that, so all the local stuff will be done into that. And for Gwent then, I would imagine there's ongoing discussions around the newly formulated Gwent Safer Partnership, so I think that would have the possibility of looking at the Gwent partnership under that. But I think really the Police and Crime Commissioner have played a huge role, haven't they, in collating that, so kind of reporting in for that for Gwent. I'd imagine as it stands would come through the Police and Crime Commissioner, but the local stuff will come through Safer Torfaen.
Okay, thank you very much. Question 8 covers paragraph 4.3.2, which mentions the routine inspection programme undertaken by individual inspectors from the Home Office. How regular do these inspections take place? Has there been any yet, or if not, are any scheduled, please?
No. Only around commission services, so things which they funded, there's a report back, but that's standard procedure anyway.
And there's nothing in the pipeline from the Home Office? Okay. No problem. So we'll move on then to question 9, and that's back to Councillor Nathan Yall.
It is a different paragraph. Right, so this one is 4.4.4. That's the table, isn't it? I had some issues with this. How confident are we that the data in that table is accurate? For example, look, we read a lot, both sort of locally and nationally, about the systemic underreporting of sexual violence against women in particular, or harassment. So looking at those, I mean, to what extent, and I guess this is trying to sort of pin down a cloud to a certain extent, what do you think about the proportion of sexual violence or harassment cases, for example, that go unreported? And actually, do we have the capacity, and if so, what work have we done to start sort of scoping or modelling what we think some of those crime rates might actually be, as opposed to those that go reported, and then, let's be honest, we drop off a cliff when we go from report to prosecution? So do we do any work basically trying to get under the skin of that and get a better, fuller picture of what some of these crimes might actually constitute?
Yeah, so violence against women and girls, domestic abuse and sexual violence, there is a board which sits specifically for that. I'm very much networked in with a colleague called Amy Thomas who manages that. There is underreporting. We know that's the case, and that's across the whole of the United Kingdom. Yeah. We also know from the Youth Endowment Fund, who are a charity organisation who did quite a lot of survey work of youngsters between the ages of 10 to 17, there's a lot of unreported sexual violence through social media. And we know that's an emerging trend. And we know that there's misogyny content on things such as TikTok and Snapchat. And I'm sure there'll be something in the near future, another sort of social media base for that type of thing. Now, government are always trying to address that with some legislation, I understand, and I think but that is a trend. But it's trying to understand to what extent that is. I think something like 26% of some of the violence against women on social media is misogynistic, and it might be higher. I've got the stats written down somewhere. But in answer to your question, yeah, there is significant underreporting. What is positive, there's an upturn in some of the offences such as stalking. Why do I say it's positive? No, we think women have got more confidence to come forward and report that now. Because the changes in legislation, the changes in the police framework around capturing that type of offence and dealing with it, and also from the charity sector who've encouraged women and girls to do the same as well, and successful media campaigns. So there is some underreporting, but there is some better uptake in reporting in some other areas there. What we do know is that within Gwent there's quite a significant number of sexual offences which are perpetrated by 10 to 17-year-olds. So it gets back to what Kath said about that intervention work in YOS, those harmful sexual behaviours which initially may start through messaging, phones, and then morph into something different and more physical and damaging. So we're just trying to sort of work through that, and it's very much an ongoing process, but there definitely is underreporting, but some better reporting in other areas.
And this is just a question, actually, for clarity. And apologies for my ignorance. What is the age of criminal culpability? So I guess, actually, if we are aware that there's an uptick in 10 and above of what are essentially crimes being perpetuated by kids, by 10-year-olds, at what point in the eyes of the law do they become, does that become a criminal act and they can be prosecuted?
Well,
was that
at a very basic level, it would be 10, but you wouldn't want to be in that position. You would not want to criminalise those individuals. So that's where YOS come in. So it's putting those interventions in earlier to deal with those issues, to try and address them at a very young age, look at what the issues within the family are in terms of, with social services support as well, and very much a full package around that. So it's getting in there early. What I was kind of saying was that the difficulty and the challenges are with social media and the impact and influence that has.
That's clarity from my point of view. It's just if the criminality kicks in at 10, presumably that's why we have data from 10 and above, and that's why you're saying that there's a large increase in that age cohort. I just want to make sure in my own head that what we are collecting, the cohort we are collecting data on, actually is the same footprint as what is criminal and what isn't criminal. Right, fine. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Question 10, I think you've answered the first part of that. Obviously, it's quite alarming that stalking and harassment crime into Vine has increased by 26% in the last 5-year period, and sexual offence crime rate has increased by 34%. And obviously, I was going to ask what work have we done to is being undertaken in these areas and what will be undertaken in the future. But I think you answered that with Councillor Yoel's questions. But part of the questions, our community team that go out, I'm interested to know, do they I go out to like sports teams, etc., and other groups of young people, and get involved and talk to these.
Thanks, Councillor. Do you mean the community support officers, the community when you say the community team?
Yeah.
Yeah, they work alongside a lot of our intervention providers, such as Positive Futures, St Giles Trust, some of our youth clubs, and it's constantly speaking to young people. They're telling them how to report things, or they're taking information back. We also run campaigns through schools and youth clubs with Fearless, which is the youth arm of Crime Stoppers, so that young people can anonymously report crimes that has happened to them or that's happened to their friends, and that information is then graded by police and acted on accordingly. So we are encouraging reporting. I think because of all the work we're doing in schools as well and around social media, young people are feeling more confident to report, which might result in an increase in our figures. And in terms of the adult side of the work, I know the VOW does board the Violence Against Women and Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence that Martin alluded to. They are doing a lot of campaigns as well around stalking and harassment. There's lots of things on TV at the moment about stalking and harassment. So I think raising the profile has been a positive, although it does look like a negative in the figures.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I get that. You're seeing people feeling more confident to report, but I was more in the thinking of going to groups. Say in particular, I'm involved in a local rugby club. We have 250 children between the age of 6 and 16, and no one has been up there to talk to them. They're in a good place because obviously, you know, they've got to be kept. They're well looked after, and but all I'm thinking is no one has been there just to give them information, which could help a lot, you know.
Yeah, I know that the CSOs that we work with know the community inside out, know the individuals and that, and have a rebuilding up a good relationship and that with individuals. And I know within certain areas when they've got youth provisions, they will kind of go into that. But I think if there is something specific that you want the CSOs or our team or anybody to engage with, then we would gladly kind of, listen to those and work with our police colleagues if there's something more that you think that could be done in regards to engagement and intervention with, specific groups, sporting clubs or anything like that. We gladly, hear that.
I just think on a club basis, there's so much discipline in there, and I think that the young people there then would be good peers for the people that are struggling in schools or outside schools. But they, if they had that comment, seeing someone out from the outside come in, and just think there might be something to think about for the future. That's all.
Yeah.
Follow up on that, because there is issue. I mean, I guess it's a follow-on. It's about most of the data that's out there, and for full disclosure, most of the data I've read about this is based in London, right? So I think Pontypool United versus some sort of the football teams in London might have slightly different issues, but there is an issue about actually how community-based prevention over a long period of time is by far the best way of doing it, and the fact actually it's how we adapt to forms of community that people up and down the borough actually choose themselves, instead of us almost forcing kids or forcing whoever we want to talk to come and talk to us. But there's a question here, and it's the unspoken through lots of the questioning here. Obviously, we're 15, 16 years down since the crash, and actually things really, just the slide in terms of funding cuts. To what extent would we have a greater appetite to be doing much more of this sort of community-based engagement and prevention if the finances were there to allow us to do it?
I know that, Torvine is really, really invested in our community strategy of doing that, of building more resilient communities, so that it isn't just, can we ring the police, can we ring the team to do something? It is around equipping the communities with what they need to support themselves and to call out if it's any kind of behaviour issues. So I think there's a real drive now, and I know that the council are really committed around that communities approach, that place-based working of what we need to do. And I think a lot with our team as well, it is what can we do better at source, within the communities. So I know that there's a real kind of push on that within the local authority to do that, because that's where we need to go to kind of build up that kind of resilient network before we get to crisis point. We're trying to intervene a lot earlier. And just to pick up on your funding issue, we can never have enough prevention. And I know the work that the team has done when we, when Kath initiated our multi-agency pupil intervention meetings, it was brilliant, and we started in comprehensive schools. Well, the issue, we needed to come far more upstream and work within those kind of primaries. So it's investing at that earlier stage so that things don't escalate to crisis point. So absolutely, plough the funding into prevention. We'll always champion that. Funding is limited. It's we don't have that long term on.
I will make this right sharp, and I've got something that might come in right at the end.
Yes, because we moved to question 11 and 12. It's Councillor Yole.
I'll take them both then, let's go together. So, question 11 is about, same paragraph, so 4.4.4. In terms of ABH, Lanarhaven North has seen an unusual increase of 200% between 2021-22 and 2022-23. And in weapon-related crime, Lanarhaven North has also showed an unusual increase of 300% in the same time period. Have we identified the possible reasons behind these unusual increases in Lanarhaven North so we can focus intervention activity?
In short, Councillor, no, we haven't. It is police data. We'd have to unpick, why those crimes are happening. But it is an example of what we will be looking at going forward when we're developing our strategy. So we will be looking at those spikes and then finding out why and working towards answering those questions.
So it leads on. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so Councillor Caswell, actually, I'm not a big fan of this data here because you're looking at a ratio sometimes of per 1,000 population, 100,000, whatever the offence type is. And then I'm more sort of what are the numbers, because you could have a number of 3 and then you could have a percentage rise at 200%. So you've always got, that's the caveat with it. But what Kath will have a sight of soon is some data through the CSPs, which the Chief Inspector, Paul Biggs, will be able to present to the CSPs, which will give you that granular detail about those issues you've spoken about. And that was picked up in a recent meeting, actually, when I think Blind Adam was mentioned, wasn't it? And he mentioned there was some arrests up there, significant arrests, which resulted in a downturn of some violent behaviour. But yeah, so going forward, we're refining this. And that's the challenge, actually. One of the priorities of the strategy, and this is the whole of the strategy, is better use of data. So it's got to come from not just the police, but it's got to come from NHS, from local authorities, from probation as well. And then it's joining those dots and making sure that when we commission services, we get the right outcomes. And then, as Kate said, place-based. What's it like in your environment and how you take that forward from a local perspective?
Thanks. You've sort of gazumped my next question, but not all of it. So unfortunately, I'll have to ask this one as well. This is about the same paragraph. So how are we using the data set out in 4.4.4 to develop our own strategy and, more importantly, focus on local activities and interventions? And it's the second bit that's new, because you basically told me what the aspiration is already. How will we compare the data we have at our disposal with other partnerships to be alerted to common issues or learn from best practice? And Becky will tell me off now, because I'm just adding a further question to what we agreed. Are there data sharing agreements in place between the partners on these issues? Because again, in previous roles I've had in local authorities in England, we actually work quite hard, and so we've got data sharing agreements across the NHS, across the police and the fire services to actually ensure we can sort of share, anonymise, aggregate, disaggregate to actually get the best data at our disposal.
So our Community Safety Hub and the partners that kind of sit within this, that's covered under a WASPI agreement, which is the Wales Accord for Sharing... What you can't say WASPI. No. Wales Accord for the Sharing... Personal information. Yeah. So within that then, those key partners then are signed up so that we're able to share the free and open disclosure of confidential information for the purposes of the detection and prevention of crime. Yeah. But to also to bring into that then our community safety hub as our office is part of that, so that the conversations that happen within that room as part of those under that under the WASPI then, we're allowed to talk about those conversations, so that we don't have to have a separate confidential meeting to discuss all of those kind of things. Those partners then that we work with, we can have those kind of free and open disclosure conversations and that within that.
And then the second part of the question, I think, was around what are those partnerships already doing? So health is a key one. So currently health have the violence prevention portal, NHS Wales. So that looks at all A&E data across Wales and here in the Nine-Bend Health Board, those that present themselves to A&E with assault injuries, and it breaks it down into categories of gender, age, etc. And Gwent Police are now in conversations with the Health Board to share data the other way, so we can try and marry up. Okay, more people presenting, for example, at A&E with injuries than we're recording in terms of offences, and if so, what's that gap? Why is that gap there, and how would we bridge that gap?
As you've used that example, is there a gap in those two, reportings and presenting?
I don't know. I suspect there may be, but I really don't know. I mean, it's very early stages at the moment, but you know, we're in a really good position now with some of that data coming through. For violence against women, there's already somebody embedded within the Grange that deals with people that may present themselves who are victims of domestic violence. Yeah. And that's been fed into the Baldress V board. I don't have that data, but I know that's you know, a body that we're working closely with going forward.
Just to add to that, one of the domestic homicide reviews that I've been involved with, we needed some information from a private health practice, which, you know, they're governed by their own rules and that, but I think there are processes that if they sit outside of our normal processes, that we would then go through their GDPR processes. People are willing to share the information. It's very unusual that people don't share that. As long as those right policies and the protocols are in place, it's rare that people don't share the information if done in the correct manner. I think because we are trying to then prevent further, for this instance, further homicides, if there's more information. So I know that the information sharing, people are far more willing, if done in the correct channels, to share that information for prevention.
So you're satisfied with the level of sharing and data that exists between the partners? It's not a case that there's a desperate problem where that needs to be unlocked to sort you out?
No, not at all. I think that's...
Just I think the challenge is then how do we present it to the group? In what format? Because you know, my view is I'd like to have, and I suppose Cathy, like an infograph. These are the real key areas within Gwent where we've got some issues and some challenges, and then you can replicate that within your own strategy at a more local level as well. So it's easy to pick up, and then you can ask the questions of what lies behind it. But so the presentation is going to be key. You know, some areas across the UK have already done that, but they're bolstered by a violence prevention unit. So some significant funding around IT and critically analysts, and that's the issue for us, is that analytical support. So the working group is, you know, working tirelessly to try and resolve that analytical support issue, and that's what you know, I'm working for tirelessly at the moment.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Question 13 we are at now. Invite Councillor Nick Byrne, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is with regards to 4.4.5 in the report with regards to substance misuse. How are we working with our partners to address the high alcohol and substance misuse in the borough?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. The substance misuse sit on our Safer Torvine board. They're currently developing a strategy as well, which we're going to be working on with them to support addressing alcohol and substance misuse across Torvine. It's not been done yet, so I'm not quite sure what their plans are, but I know they've just recommissioned I think it's 3 young person support services who are now going to be working in our schools in Torfaen to address substance misuse, the spikes in vapings and alcohol consumption. So I think as soon as that strategy has been developed, we will be linking it in with our serious violence reduction strategy as well.
Okay, just to add on to that, just after that, is there a particular area where it's like sort of at its peak in the borough at all? Or would you say it's just sort of spread out, just sort of a bit of everywhere, or is it one particular area we need to focus on the more, or?
To be honest, if we're looking at, I can only answer, I suppose, from antisocial behaviour as a result of alcoholism in the borough, and it really isn't. It doesn't seem to be a huge issue. Maybe in our town centres, Cwmbran around Wetherspoons area, you could say that it might be a flashpoint which could result in some fighting, some criminal damage. But I don't have any evidence to suggest that's the case. I suppose it's anecdotal from what you hear attending different meetings. But it's certainly an interesting, area to look into to see if there are any hot spots linked to alcohol use.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
If I can share quickly, though, I've got a question on clarity of the data as presented in this table. I understand this is not our data, but it just struck me reading some of it's a bit apples and pears, and it's just it could be it's a styling issue. But we say in that bottom row about substance misuse in the table on 445. We've seen 299 individuals assessed for alcohol use, fine, but then we're ranked second in terms of highest for substance service assessments. Now, are alcohol and drug misuse clubbed together in terms of those assessments, or are there separate assessments for both alcohol and drug misuse? Because it feels like we're saying, well, there's almost 300 people who we've assessed for alcohol, but then there's 229 who go in for substance misuse, and it's not. I wondered whether there was, again, whether that was an apple and a pear being chucked into the data.
We're happy to clarify that. Yeah, not at all. I just think if we would just put that down as an action for us to kind of clarify that data, that's no problem.
Okay, thank you. Move on to question 15 and 16 now. Councillor Liam Coles, please.
Thank you, Chair. Question 15 relates to 4.5.2, which states, while strategies are being developed and data is gathered, a serious violence subgroup of Safer Torfaen will be established. The question is, who will make up the membership of this subgroup? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So again, this is a subgroup that's going to sit underneath Safer Torfaen, so it will be similar partners to the responsible authorities, headed up by myself, with Gwent Police, colleagues from Health, Education, Fire and Rescue Service, Social Services, licensing. It could be quite a few different departments from within Torfaen that will make up that subgroup, but it'll be led by the community safety team. Thanks.
Thank you. And my next question, question 16, which is in relation to the interventions mentioned in 4.6.1. How do we determine who receives intervention activity? And do we only provide intervention to those at risk of going into serious violence and or crime, or do we also provide interventions to those who have already offended or are repeat offenders? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. So the first point in relation to data, prior to having the serious violence duty, we didn't really get data from schools. So we had our multi-agency pupil intervention meetings where we knew about the pupils that were causing problems, but we never had any data on the kind of problems that were going on in schools. Because we started getting some funding and we were looking at interventions, obviously there was never enough to go around every comprehensive school in Torfaen. So we did ask schools to start providing data. So we pulled together an agreement with the comprehensive schools to look at their My Concern data. And we've asked for half-termly updates on violence against pupils, violence against teachers, verbal abuse, threats, assault, criminal damage, the kind of behaviours that we're interested in looking at. And then from that, we're able to decide which school is in need of which intervention at which specific time, because there's a host of interventions that we have available to us. So that's how at the moment we're determining what school receives for intervention. And then can you repeat the second question, please?
Yes, of course. It was, do we only provide intervention to those at risk of going into serious violence, or do we also provide interventions to those who have already offended or are repeat offenders?
So we both do both, really. So the interventions that were discussed within this report, they're around prevention. So these are young people identified by our MAPI process and our strike process for antisocial behaviour who have not been involved in violence or criminal offences, but are displaying the risk factors that would lead them into that kind of lifestyle, I suppose. So these interventions are for prevention, but we do also have a host of interventions for young people already in our process to help them. One of them being our mentoring programme, where they get a one-to-one mentor to, guide them through life, I suppose, make better choices. And then those young people already in the criminal justice system then go to the youth offending service and are supported by us with some of our interventions, but they're more court-led orders.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next question, which is 4.6.1 also. In the report, it mentions that 6 young people were mentored over a period of 6 months with positive outcomes for all. Are you able to provide more detail on what positive outcomes that have been seen, please?
Yeah, of course. So with the mentoring for the serious violence intervention that we had a short amount of time. So we wanted to target the young people who were causing the most problems in school, really. They were linked to some one-on-one fights. They were linked to verbal abuse to the teachers, some criminal damage. So by having a mentor who could work with them in school and out in the community, we did see that their attendance in school was better. There was a reduction in the amount of times they were put into internal exclusion rooms for poor behaviour. There was one who was at risk of going to the PRU on a full-time basis. That turned around and the young person is now back full-time in education. There are still some grumblings in the community with some of their behaviours, but in terms of their antisocial behaviour and, the violence, that's reducing each time, and we haven't had to take any further action on any of the young people who've gone through our process. I do have case studies on some of the mentoring that are anonymised, so if members would ever like to see a case study to hear some of the successes, I'm more than happy to share. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Very good. Question 18, another question by Councillor Nathan Yall, please.
Data gathering was also ensured the team can target resources where they are needed, also and apply for evidence-based funding. So I guess it comes back to funding questions again. Right? Is there enough money available to be applied for? Yeah. And crucially, how much time and resource is being taken up by people, either you two or people across the partnership, in applying for this funding, which could be better, which quite frankly is taking your time away from doing the day job?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I think we would all jump in on that and say there's never enough funding, but I think that's just the way it is now, isn't it? Resources and that are dwindling, and I think the teams and that we just work better. We just work more focused around things like that. So I think that priority around funding, and we have regular funding from the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner. So that regular funding now means that that's staff employed by that. Our community safety team, we have core members of our team employed by the local authority. So not having that pressure for our core team, for most of our core team, is not something that they have in other local authorities. So we're able to kind of do a lot that we can think long term, or as long term as you possibly can, because the council have invested within our team. So that is great that we've got officers and that are in permanent roles to do that. So we're not constantly trying to fill in a funding bid to sustain that funding. So that's great for the team itself. So that's, you know, that enables us to do that. But I think the long-term resourcing, the Police and Crime Commissioner have said with the funding that we receive from that, that's, you know, as much as it's going, it's a given that this is your allocation, so we know what's coming year on year. We're then able to support Positive Futures, we can support some within the play service. There's lots of work that we could kind of do then to support our partners. But I know Kath has spent a lot of time looking for that external funding, if it's SPF funding, the Safer Streets funding. It's huge, isn't it? The volume and the details, the data. Have you got a new initiative? We don't want a new initiative. We know what works. Can we just carry on doing what we're doing rather than pulling the rug on a great intervention because we haven't got the funding? That is a battle that you know, we do come up against. We have to kind of, you know, do those returns and that. But I think those core funders, we're lucky that we've got the stability of that. But those ad hoc ones, it's just, you know, it's not good for the long term.
Chair, shall I ask question 22 as well? Because I've got another question which is about it's about paragraph further down, but it's essentially it's about similar. Is that all right? It's similar stuff. So this is about paragraph 6.3. I guess this is getting to the number what I'm getting at actually about specific interventions that we actually have to seek external charitable funding and endowment for, basically. So the line is, the interventions used to reduce serious violence, particularly youth violence, is dependent on external grant funded and yearly cycles. So are we exploring interventions that can be delivered in different ways, so as not to be reliant on external grant funding? Which comes back to actually the point where my ears pricked up when Mark was talking about using the rugby club. It's about community-led approaches to violent crime reduction. And I guess the killer question here, will there be of course there'll be an impact, but will there be an impact on partnership working if grant funding isn't fully realised, or if after the next round of funding we are not successful? Because again, the reality ends up being if we're going to trusts and foundations, you mentioned St Giles, to actually ensure the money isn't there to do stuff that is really important. They also have a finite of money in their endowments in any given year, and it could be you don't win it next time, right? So actually, I guess there is that question about future-proofing our activity and how dependent are we going to be on non-public funding to deliver what should be core services?
Well, I think you've got a slick machine already in operation, you know, which is down to the hard work, you know, and Kath really articulated what I spoke about there about understanding what's going on in schools. I mean, she just articulated perfectly, you know, already doing that work. So, but sometimes you're trying to prove a negative, aren't you? Which is difficult because your intervention's already there in place. Now, getting back to funding, that's always going to be a pressure. And it's not just the funding, it's the resilience. So if you go to St Giles, for example, for a commissioned service, have they got the staff available to provide that service? And if they lose some of that staff, what's then the resilience? Because you've already commissioned that work. So we've had examples where they've lost staff because they may say the contract is only for 12 months and people want that security, so they're looking beyond for the next 12 months, etc. And then you almost automatically lose that individual that's providing a really good service for someone within the Torvine area or Blaenau or wherever. So it's not just about funding, it's about the sustainability of what the commission service provides for you as well. So that's the challenge for us. But I think it's also the duty goes beyond funding. It's talking about embedding systemic change through the way that we work together. So it's all about what works, what can we learn from others, which isn't always about funding as well. And what services have we already got that are probably doing some of that work? And I've found that already. So you know, each YOS across the whole of the county probably operates in a different manner, as CSPs do to a certain extent. Some are, I think, are doing it better than others, but some are doing some good stuff as well, which those that I would say are the shining light should look at also. So it's really about what's working at the moment, sharing that professional expertise and experience, and then also trying to get funding from the third sector such as youth endowment, but St Giles can push that for us. The Crime Commissioner, I know, is committed to funding. I think there's been a 5% increase in some of the funding streams on there for this year, but we don't know what next year is going to look like. And we don't know if there'll be any further funding from the serious violence duty, which comes direct from the Home Office. So those are the challenges we're going to face.
Okay. Thanks. We'll go back to question 20. If you don't mind, Councillor, I'll take this one on to give you a whiff, because you have got a couple more coming up. It is in 4.6.4, and what partnerships are in place to tackle cross-border issues and to promote cross-border working?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So with our anti-social behaviour programme, we've pulled together a Gwent policy to allow for information sharing across border, so that people going over into Monmouthshire or Newport, where they were on our process, would be mirrored in another. And it's similar for the cases for the young people involved in serious violence. Also, the serious organised crime group and the the other groups, they're regional, so that there's regional working, not just at the strategic level, but operationally as well. Yep. So they are in place.
Okay, lovely, many thanks. Going to question 21, and that's a question for Councillor Liam Coles, please.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to paragraph 6.2, it states that there is limited capacity within the data team in Torfaen to fully develop the needs assessment. What impact will this have? Thank you.
Yeah, I think we spoke earlier. It's there's members of the team within our data and research team, although it's so small, that can provide that data. And I think there was a query earlier in the day around one of the statistics that were included in the report. So straight away we're going back to say, oh, we've got that statistic. What does it mean? So I think that we have limited people within that team that can provide the data, and they've been really helpful. And I know colleagues across Gwent and those within the police and within Gwent, the Gwent police analyst has been amazing at kind of pulling all of this data. But for us, it's really hard to understand that data, to analyse what it is. And I think that is a gap. There's, it's a skill set that's it's a really specific skill set, isn't it, to kind of understand that. So I think resources, that is a limited capacity that we have. We have the capacity to provide data, but again, it's that looking at the rich data. How do we unpick that? How do we look at that as a partnership and proactively do something to kind of unpick that? So yeah, it is limited. I don't know the answer to around getting more resources, external funding, all of those kind of things. But yeah, that is a limited resource. Martin, did you?
Yeah, just to say, so the All Wales Violence Prevention Unit, I've got quite extensive analytical support, and they've asked me questions recently about what we're doing here, so they can understand what support could they provide potentially going forward. Because I think, with advances in technology in terms of data harvesting, AI, etc., we'll be having different conversations in the future around our data and where we get it from. But that localised data at the moment is still very much within, what we can provide here with the limited capacity that we've got. So there's a colleague of mine works in the Crime Commissioner's office, Laura, who tries to get some of the data from police and then some data from health and from partners and put something together. She's upskilling her talents around that area. So again, as an interim measure, that's probably how we're going to progress things and then share that information. So, and it's a challenge getting some data from other partners. So probation are a little bit short, a bit shortfall in some of the data, but actually they don't want lots of data from them. I just want headline information. So we're all cited on. They provided that the other day, and we've shared it in the group and the CSPs about what their caseload is like and what type of offences they are managing, which predominantly is violence. So that's the kind of thing we need to know. And once we've got that, then it allows us to prompt certain questions when the working group about, well, what are you doing in terms of managing these offenders and what risk do they pose when they come back into the community? For Torfaen example, is there some intervention projects you've got working with them at the moment or when they were in prison, etc. So it's just getting some of that, but it's that awareness, it's just generating awareness as well, so we're aware of what's going on.
Okay, thank you very much. Move to question 23, which is another question for Councillor Liam Coles, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a generic question, really. Are there areas within the requirements where we need to focus greater activity? Thank you.
Well, at the highest level, Councillor, I mean, Kate sits on your domestic homicide review groups, and that's, you know, probably some of the most important work around serious violent crime that people will be involved in, and it's statutes, and you're reporting directly to the Home Office. You're getting requests from the Home Secretary, and I know Kate, when Priti Patel was Home Secretary, was dealing with some of that work as well, you know. And you know, there's a lot of pressure that goes along with that. But we know, we know we've had those homicides, and it's understanding what were the causes of them, what interventions could be in place, as I said earlier. So that's always going to be a concern. And sometimes you're always looking back. It's very difficult to predict and prevent some of that, you know. But you know, the more that we learn about those incidents, the better we are going forward in terms of prevention. Knife crime. So that is of great concern to us because we see it in the newspapers, online, social media, in the news all the time, don't we? So that's why it's very much front and centre. And knife crime is predominantly linked to youth violence, the intervention work which Kath spoke about. So, you know, our knife crime is relatively low in this part of the world, thankfully, but we know it's higher in parts of London, Birmingham, etc. And you know, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look to see, do we fully understand to what extent it is, because a lot of knife crime will go unreported, because if people are carrying knives and they're not found with a knife, we don't know about it, do we? So it's almost until you have stop and search. But for example, Newport, in the police in Newport last week, and it's on the website, I've copied in Kath actually, they did a knife sweep down Pill, and they recovered 14 knives and bladed instruments secreted in various places. Because we know from intelligence that people hide knives in certain locations, so if they ever stopped in the street, they may not be in possession of it directly, but they know it's stowed behind the wall nearby. So if that's their area where they're dealing drugs from or involved in some gang-related crime. You know, do we have incidents of that in Torfaen and Cwmbran? We don't know, but it might be that the police may want to do something with, you know, the local authority in the future similar to that. But it would be intelligence-led, and that intelligence, again, could come from the schools or could come from youngsters' youth groups, rugby clubs, etc. So to try and get that information, we commission some services, and we fund part of Crime Stoppers and Fearless. Fearless is designed and targeted at youngsters, and it's like a Crime Stoppers for them to report anonymously their concerns, certainly around violent crime, because they will know these type of things. They talk amongst each other, but they will do it through Snapchat and they will do it through other social media. So Fearless is designed only to take reports through social media, and it's very prescriptive. So again, we're trying to get that information. So really, just to sort of summarise, you know, domestic homicides and knife crime are really key components of that, and it's just been cited and aware of what our true picture is.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And for our penultimate question, we go to Councillor Nick Byrne, please.
Yeah, this question is, are there any requirements under the duty that will be more difficult to deliver than others? If so, what are they?
Yeah, to be honest, I think we're in a really good place. I think with Safer Torfaen, with our collaboration with partners across Gwent, we're in a really good place to be able to deliver this duty. You know, I've got no concerns then that the council will not be in compliant with being able to deliver this duty. It's just how well we can do that, isn't it? You can tick a box and say, well, we're compliant, but how much more could we do? So I think with that additional data and understanding the data, analysing that, I think there's probably more that we can do. We spoke really heavily around the need for prevention and intervention, you know, community resilience. There's so much more that we can do to look at the wider determinants of the causes of serious violence. that I think as a council we can do a lot of that, and I think we are doing a lot of that. So I think there's no real concerns that I think we won't be able to do any of this. It's just kind of how well and how in depth that we can do it.
Yeah, and I just add to that, I think it's really important to have strong professional working relationships. So, you know, for instance, you know, both Kath and Kate, you know, we speak to her on a regular basis about any concerns, pressures, challenges that we might face. And I think that's really important, because then I might not have the answer, but I can put them in contact with someone in the police that might be able to give them some advice and help and guidance there, and likewise they can do the same for me. So it's that professional working relationships and continuing that partnership approach will put us in good stead going forward with the duty.
Okay, thank you very much. That penultimate question is actually the last question, because you've answered my question as well. So all it leaves me is to thank Councillor Jones, all the officers and Martin for the fantastic detailed responses to all the questions. You know, I thought it was really interesting, and it was really a good meeting. Before I invite you to leave the meeting, have you got any closing remarks, really?
Yeah, just really wanted to thank you for your time. And I think, you know, we live and breathe this, don't we, every day? This is what we're doing. But actually, when you put it down on paper and you look at all the work that is being done by the team, excuse me, and the interventions and that we're doing, the impact that we're having on those young people, their families and the community, you know, it is kind of great to be able to kind of share that. So I think you've just given us some real posing questions that we're thinking, oh, actually, do we need to do more around that? What else can we explore around that? So, you know, really wanted to thank the team and that for the hard work, and our exec member for supporting us through this. And thank yourselves for your time in that this afternoon. Very much appreciated.
Okay. Oh, sorry,
yeah,
Martin.
Thank you, Councillor, and just thank you for inviting me. And it's important to have the scrutiny to answer those questions. I'm really pleased that we've had lots and lots of questions. And just reinforce what Kate has said, you know, but also just to say there's some really good work going out there. You've got a really good team, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here, but you've got a really good team, really proactive, on the front foot, looking for answers, you know, really innovative and, you know, reliable. So, you know, a good place to start from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And all it leaves me to do now is to invite you to leave our meeting, please.
Members' attention to the scrutiny activity for the report that you've just scrutinised. So the Prosperous Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee is invited to review the information provided and determine whether the Council is adequately meeting the statutory requirements of the Serious Violence Prevention Duty, Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act 2022. So that's the first part. Are members satisfied following deliberations today that you are satisfied that we will adequately meet the statutory requirements? Yes? Thank you. The second part then is to assess to what extent the Council with its partners is targeting interventions to prevent and reduce serious violence.
Yeah, thanks. I was really impressed by that, actually. I've known for a long time it's it is a very high performing team across the council, but I think they've given me I'm quite satisfied by that's the word I was in. they've given me confidence. Look, they know what they're doing, and I think it's one of those issues that the fact that very sensibly we're using what were pre-existing arrangements and partnerships to actually make sure this new duty came through, I think is really good.
No, I totally agree on that. You know, the question, obviously, you know, it could be Nathan being there with giving them that extra scrutiny and make them think that a bit deeper, and it was good, you know. And like they said at the end, it's giving them a bit of food for thought that if they are lapsing in certain areas, that I've given them the jog to go there. Like, so that was good, really good, I thought.
Thank you. So then just finally, it's whether you have any further comments or recommendations for areas of improvement.
Well, it's not improvement, but it's issues that I think between us we've flagged up that it might be areas. I think just to limit my intervention to 3, there's the thing of where we don't have sufficient resource on the data, and I guess which they've admitted to, and I guess the question is actually how we can get to a position where they can both access, manipulate and present that data in a way that is easier for us to consume and for actually quote-unquote normal people to consume, but also how they use that to actually share with partners about where and what the hotspots are. I think there is an issue about funding. I know we sort of scratched the surface there, but if we're stuck in a position where certain important bits of work around prevention is only happening because we've had to resort to non-public funding and trust and foundation money and schemes to apply for, that's a bit of a warning signal for me, because there is no guarantee that is going to continue. And the only third thing I would add, actually, is because I know there was an issue in the report about the fact that we do a lot of schools-based intervention with the youngsters, and I think in the conversation with Rebecca, I did have a question. Or at least I would have had a question about actually how is that being undertaken, because obviously we wouldn't want to further stigmatise those young boys who are being worked with, because we all know there are social determinants to a lot of that bad behaviour. But I guess there is a question about whether we need to think again about the balance between school or community-based approaches. I'd never thought, look, I did not play rugby for Pontypool United in my youth, right? So I wouldn't have thought about how that is a mechanism to sort of target some of these kids.
Yeah,
I thought that was really good.
Well, yeah, because obviously within a club community, they're different to what they are in school. Right. So, you know, I see them on a 2 or 3 times a weekly basis, and you look at them and there's no misbehaviour or nothing untoward going on, and yet I know that in that group there are some of them in school that are having problems. So I'm just thinking, because they were then, their peers looking after them, they're different kettle of fishes then, when they're there. So it could be something that they could be harnessing by going to community rather than schools, because school, it is totally different, isn't it? You know, when you're in school. It's a totally different environment. So it's just food for thought, because it wouldn't cost them anything just to try it or pilot it. Councillor Byrne?
Yeah, totally agree with you, Mark. And I think being able to go to people anonymously as well is a great thing. And that was one thing I think possibly we maybe could have put a question in there. A lot of things are reported for criminal activity to the police, and it's anonymous. But I think a lot of people is it really anonymous? Is it going to come back on them? A lot of information goes in, like they were saying about intel coming from schools. Does that actually, that's something we could have put in there. I wanted to put a question in later on, but like I said, maybe that's something in the future, and the fact that they're going to be working to find the hotspots where there's issues with children, or young people, I should say, drinking, vaping, and obviously misuse as well. That's definitely something that would be good, that we know those hotspots. That's something they could target, them hotspots, because there's bound to be hotspots where that others. But yeah, other than that, I thought it was a really good meeting, to be fair.
Yeah, so in terms of that point, Councillor Byrne, obviously the focus more so today was on our compliance with the duty, but certainly the points you've raised would be good suggestions perhaps to put into visioning for the next year ahead, that you may want to look at more specific activities. So say that the youth crime, that may be something that you want to look at next year, you know, under the communities, because you have to take one crime and disorder, at least one report on this item. So yeah, it might be that you want to focus more down and get that more detailed information in an item coming up in the next scrutiny year. So I'll note that down.
Well, yeah, it's the perfect place to stop it, isn't it? Just they'd be in that age, rather than it escalate on, like, shock to you between 10 and 17-year-olds being for the statistics for that. Really shocked. I've got to be honest.
Thank you. So can I just go back quickly to Councillor, your point? So I've noted the one about the community aspect of prevention work, etc., as a recommendation. The funding one, are you happy for me to note that as a comment, or are you able to formulate that in terms of a recommendation? I know you've raised it as a warning signal, you have concerns over it.
Yeah, I think there's something about raising it as a concern, but also asking the question about whether we need to be, this is not the language you will use, but whether we need to be kicking the tyres a bit more thoroughly to kind of future-proof some of our activities to ensure that they are, I mean, there's going to be a worry if essentially, if we end up with very important services that are dependent upon non-public funding, some of these services are going to stop. And it's all very well to say, yes, but we've got more funding and a very good team. But the reality is we're going to end up not being able to pursue potentially innovative, impactful strategies if that funding isn't there, and actually to what extent are we sort of future-proofing the service against sort of negative applications. I can talk to you about that came out like a word salad, but I can happily sit down and write that.
So who are you aiming that recommendation at in terms of the exec member, the council, or
it would have to be
government?
The issue is the wider partnership. There's a question going back about the long-term viability of these partnerships if they are dependent upon what is essentially charitable money.
Otherwise, it's just a game of snakes and ladders, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay, so other than those points, Chair, I only had 2 action points to add to the action sheet, which was the clarification on the data on the substance misuse that you requested, and also Catherine offer an anonymised case study in terms of what the positive outcomes were from their mentoring scheme. So she offered to provide that as well.
Everybody okay with all that? Yeah,
I'm happy.
Everybody happy? So we can go on now to agenda item 6. Obviously, it's supposed to be an item for next meeting.
So, as members will be aware, at last council you approved changes to the portfolios of the scrutiny committees. So, there's AGM next week. Members will be appointed to whichever committees you've set out. So the date of the next meeting for all of the scrutiny committees will be set after AGM next week, Chair. And we'll also consult with all the committee members as to preferred timings of meetings.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, and thank you all for a very good year. We've had some good meetings. It's been interesting. And let's hope our paths meet again really soon. So all it leaves me to do is to close the meeting. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks all.
See you both. Take care.
Thanks, Chair.
Bye.